All right, we're back to the Introduction to Windows 2012, and we're talking about Windows Deployment Services. Now, in the lab, we've already built a domain controller and a DHCP server. And we're going to add Windows Deployment Services to that using very bad practices. In that when you add Windows Deployment Services, you should put your installation images on a drive different from your main drive. Now you may recall we've got our vSphere server here, and we have domain controller 11 and DHCP 12 at 10.0.0.11 and 10.0.0.12. The domain controller's got Active Directory domain services and DNS integrated with Active Directory installed on it. And DHCP 12 at this point only has DHCP. So you'll see that this DHCP is now in Server Manager on DHCP 12. And on DC11, we've configured the scope after installing DHCP. Now we can go back to all servers, hit DC11, right-click, add role and feature, and we're going to install Windows Deployment Services. Now you might ask what Windows Deployment Services is. And if you click on it, it says it provides a simplified, secure means of rapidly and remotely deploying Windows operating systems to computers over the network. So some people use Ghost, and I believe Mozilla's got a Ghost-like product. And some people use things like Ninite. But this is the integrated Microsoft solution. And relatively speaking, it works. You can customize it with the Microsoft Deployment Kit. It's really going to be better if you get machines that have a copy of Windows preloaded onto them, or rather have a recent version of Windows, either 6.1 or 6.2 preloaded, for at least servers, because it has the required partitions. And if you don't have them, you're not going to be able to capture a unattended installation. Well, you'll have to make an unattended.xml file for the answer file to install Windows, or tell the system how to partition, rather than saying, like, I got a machine, I grabbed an image of it, and now I'm going to do things with it. So we've just installed Windows Deployment Services from DC11 onto our DHCP server. And you'll see here there's a little thing saying the server is not configured, so let's configure the server. Here's some information that you should read on your own about the server. You might want to pause. And basically it says what operates and what's needed. I believe this is a typo here, and that should be uses DNS for IP addressing, which is you want this to be a member of your Active Directory domain so you can auto-join things, although you might not and have more interesting times. So it assumes you've got an active DHCP server and a functioning DNS server, and you can put records in them, and that you have an NTF partition to store images. And typically that partition would not be your system drive. So it throws a warning if you choose that as a bad practice. Now, do you want to respond to any clients or not? Do you want to respond to pre-staged clients that you pre-stage by using the MAC address of your client machines or the GUID of the network cards? Or do you just want to respond to everything, or you can require administrator approval for computers that aren't pre-collected. So let's do this one. So I'm activating it. I'm telling it how I want to deal with it. I'm going to add an image. And I have no idea what machine I'm on. I'm on this machine or I'm on that machine. So DHCP 12, CD-ROM drive, disconnect from data store image. DC11 doesn't have a D drive. So it looks like I'm trying to browse on the machine I happen to be on, which would make a certain amount of sense for some issues I was having with the WinSXS. Yep. So now I can add the image files, which come on the boot, sources, I don't know how I browse that. Administrator, computer. D sources. We're going to create an image group. And there's an image path. So first it's going to do the boot image. And then it's going to do the install image, I imagine. Since this takes a while, I'm going to pause the video and come back when this is done. Okay, I came back just to show you that this is adding the Windows image as opposed to the boot image, and it's image 1 of 4 of Windows Server. The image has an index on it for each of the versions it can install. 2 of them are core, and 2 of them are GUI. And you might want to remember, as far as what you can do with them, Standard and Data Center have the same functionality, but Standard is limited to hosting 2 virtual machines with 2 processors each, whereas the Data Center version allows you to host as many machines as you can fit on, which could easily be above 30 in this day and age. All right, this says it's finished, and I've got images. So if I open this lab, there's install images. I have an image group that we created, and I've got the 4 different installs that were on the disk. I've got the boot image from the DVD. This is the Server 2012. This will only work on 64-bit architecture. If you're doing clients, you probably want to grab a copy from Windows 8 or from Windows 7 or from Windows Vista, and you can inject drivers into this by right-clicking and say add driver package or driver group, and you can enable and disable the packages. That's something that you're going to have to work out with the hardware that you're running. So once you have those, you can click on your install image or your boot image and right-click and say add driver packages to image. Add driver packages. Ooh. No, driver packages just go on the boot image, which is typically it would be a network card and a hard disk controller. You might have video if you had something weird, but everything's relatively bog standard at this point. So let's take a look at our Windows Deployment Server service. We've got boot images, we have image groups, essentially we have no pending devices. Multicast transmissions are if you want to have a bunch of machines start up at once and you use UDP, you can broadcast it once. You can check the properties of your server, PXE response, require administrator approval. This will run automatically if you don't have it. Let's take it out. Might do it later. I'm going to give it with this format, which is really, I'm creating a computer. It's going to be named the guy who put it in. These accounts going to go in the same location and the same domain as the server. I could specify an OU. Since I'm doing servers, I could say browse, lab, servers, OK. Boot, do I want them to press F12? Do I want to go through? What do I do for these clients? Do I have default boot images? Client things, do I enable uninstalled installation, in which case I'm going to have a unattend file. Do I not want to join the domain? DHCP. Uh-oh. I think I want both of these boxes. Interesting. Okay. What this is doing, quite frankly, is saying that because I'm not on the server, it's got the DHCP server, it doesn't recognize those options as valid, and therefore it's not going to configure them for me, which is a bit depressing. If you think that this server is not the one I wanted to install WDS on. I installed it on DC-11. Okay. Let's check our DHCP scope. Houston, we have a problem. There is an option in here for PXE. Thought it was about 60. Server options don't appear to be set. Well, I put this in the wrong place. Let's see what happens if we create a new virtual machine. Nat 1. Open it up. Power it on. F12. I'm not in. Control-Alt, insert. I'm clicked in the window, right? F12 for network boot. I have been installing my DHCP server, not on, my Windows deployment services on the DHCP server and not the domain controller. So it hasn't quite given the same options. You can see that this machine that we just created and does not have a optical drive connected, has booted off the network, pulled the boot image off of the domain controller. Really bad practice. And has given us this Windows Deployment Services Windows setup. So you have to put in the password and username. And for this machine, I'm just going to make it standard. I'm still leaving the GUI. Core is more secure, less nice to deal with, and at one point it could be argued that you saved space, but one of the new features of Windows is that you can use data deduplication. If you've got an NTFS partition, data deduplication takes out a lot of redundancy, up to above 90% if you've deployed a lot of copies of a generic workstation. And even servers are probably more because the operating system, the antivirus, it's all the same across all your machines. So that's all duplicated data. And if you deduplicate it and make one copy of each of those files, then that saves you a lot of space. I'm going to pause this, and we've now installed the Windows deployment services, and we've started on our NAT server for connectivity to the world at large. So in the basic lab build, which has got the minimum stuff that really you have to know for the exam, and it's the minimum that you need to run sort of a small office network, if not and anything larger. We're going to get network address translation set up, not because it's wonderful, but because you'll need to see it. And we're going to set up Windows software update services and do a little thing with group policy. So this is going to be paused. See you later.